My name is Helen Ward. I am 68 years old, and 3 weeks ago I buried the only man I thought truly understood me. Jonathan and I were married for 43 years. He was a historian, a man of discipline and precision. Every evening he'd come home smelling faintly of old books and ink, sit by the fireplace, and tell me stories about forgotten wars and lost civilizations. I thought those stories were the most dramatic things I'd ever hear in my life. I was wrong, because the real tragedy came not from history books but from my own daughter. The night of the funeral, the house was still heavy with flowers and silence. My hands smelled like candle wax and lilies as I packed away Jonathan's black suit, the last one he would ever wear. That's when Clarissa walked into the study. Her heels clicked against the oak floor like gunshots. "Mother," she said, her voice cool, rehearsed. "You can't stay here." I thought I misheard. "This is my home," I whispered. "I've lived here longer than you've been alive." Clarissa's smile was tight, almost pitying. "According to Father's will, everything now belongs to me. The house, the accounts, the properties. I've been generous letting you grieve here, but it's time you moved on. There's a senior residence in Denver Heights. Safe, clean, affordable. Affordable. The word cut deeper than any knife. My daughter, my only child, was suggesting I trade the home where I raised her for a room in a concrete box filled with strangers. I reached for Jonathan's photo on the mantel. His eyes, frozen in that black and white frame, seemed to ask me to stay calm. "Clarissa," I said, "this isn't what your father wanted. He promised." She cut me off. "Promises don't matter. Paperwork does, and I have all of it." Her husband Damien appeared in the doorway, holding 2 suitcases. My suitcases, packed, ready, as if I was nothing more than a guest overstaying her welcome. Damien's tone was polite, almost cheerful. "We've arranged a car, Mrs. Ward. You'll be more comfortable somewhere suited for your stage of life." Stage of life, as if I were a broken appliance being shipped to the junkyard. When I refused to move, Clarissa's mask slipped. Her voice turned sharp, colder than the Denver winter outside. "Mother, don't make this harder than it needs to be. Find somewhere else to fade away. You're useless now. Useless." That word echoed in my bones, heavier than the soil covering Jonathan's grave. I didn't argue, I didn't scream. I did what I had done my entire life, what they always expected me to do. I stayed silent. I let Damien carry the bags. I walked out of my own house with nothing but a small box of photographs and the taste of betrayal burning on my tongue. And as the car pulled away, I looked back at the windows glowing behind me. My daughter's silhouette moved across the curtains, already claiming the space as hers. She thought she had won. She thought the story ended here. But Clarissa had forgotten something important, something Jonathan once told me in a quiet moment of honesty. "A pawn may seem weak, Helen, but in the right hands, even a pawn can become the queen." And that night, in the back seat of that car, I decided I would not die as a pawn. The Sunset Inn was not a home. It was a waiting room for people who had nowhere left to go. The neon sign outside flickered like it was mocking me. $1.52 a night, free Wi-Fi, breakfast included. I sat on the thin mattress, listening to the hum of a vending machine in the hallway, trying to believe that after 43 years of marriage, my life had been reduced to 2 suitcases and a cardboard box of photographs. But then I remembered. 6 months before Jonathan died, he handed me a package wrapped in brown paper. He had that serious look, the one he wore only when history was about to turn dangerous. "Helen," he'd said, "this isn't for Clarissa, it's for you. If anything happens to me, open it only when you're alone." At the time, I thought it was just another book, another draft of one of his endless essays. I tucked it away, unopened, on the highest shelf of the study. But as I sat in that motel room, his words rang in my head like a bell tolling from the grave. I opened the box of photographs, and there it was, hidden beneath family albums and birthday cards, a small black leather book. Jonathan's handwriting pressed into the cover in gold letters. The ledger. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages. It wasn't a diary. It wasn't history. It was a map. Dates, transactions, names of companies I'd never heard of. Some crossed out in red ink, others circled in green. Next to each entry was Jonathan's neat signature, his historian's precision in every line. But then I reached the back pages and froze. There, in Jonathan's careful script, were words that cut through my grief like a knife. If Clarissa contests this will, if she attempts deception, go to Elias Monroe. Elias Monroe, Jonathan's oldest friend, a lawyer, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. I closed the ledger, pressing it against my chest as if Jonathan's heartbeat still lived in the leather. My daughter had told me that everything belonged to her, that I was nothing. But this book whispered a different story. For the first time since Jonathan's funeral, I felt something burning hotter than grief. It was suspicion. Clarissa had always been brilliant, persuasive, ruthless when she wanted something. But if Jonathan had gone so far as to write her name in a secret ledger, warning me, then he must have known exactly what she was capable of. And maybe, just maybe, he had left me the weapon to stop her. The next morning, I stood at the bus stop in the freezing Denver wind, clutching the ledger like it was a holy text. People rushed past me, earbuds in, faces blank, unaware that inside my coat I was carrying the key to $33 million and the truth about my daughter. The bus doors hissed open. As I stepped inside, I whispered to myself, "You wanted me gone, Clarissa, but you forgot who taught you how to read. Now it's my turn to study the fine print." I was on my way to Elias Monroe, and I had a feeling Clarissa's perfect little empire was about to crack wide open. Clarissa didn't stop at throwing me out. That was just the beginning. 3 days after I moved into that dingy motel, I walked past my old street just to see the house one more time. The place I had polished, scrubbed, decorated for decades. And what did I see through the wide glass windows? Clarissa hosting a dinner party. My dining table, Jonathan's mahogany table, was covered with crystal glasses and bottles of wine that cost more than my monthly motel rent. Guests were laughing. Damien was pouring drinks like a charming host. And there at the head of the table sat Clarissa, in my chair, my seat. I slipped closer to the window, and that's when I heard it. One of the guests, a colleague from her law firm, raised a glass. To the new lady of the house. Clarissa's smile was wide, but her words were like poison. Well, someone had to take charge. Mother was sentimental, always dusting old books and hanging onto useless traditions. Honestly, I don't know how she managed this place at all. Laughter erupted around the table. I felt my chest tighten, but it wasn't from sadness, it was rage. Damien added with a smug grin. Helen always meant well, but she was never equipped for big responsibilities. It's better this way. Clarissa has vision. The Ward legacy deserves a sharper mind than a retired librarian. Retired librarian. They reduced my 40 years of sacrifice to a punchline. But it didn't end there. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a message from Clarissa. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't concern. It was a photo. My garden, the roses Jonathan planted for our 25th anniversary, had been bulldozed. In their place, construction equipment and a sketch for a glass wine cellar. The caption under the photo, "Time to modernize, Mother. You should have done this years ago." I wanted to scream. I wanted to storm into that house and drag her out by the arm like I did when she was 16 and caught sneaking in after curfew. But I didn't. Because every insult, every humiliation was proof. Proof that Clarissa wasn't just greedy. She was cruel, and cruelty leaves evidence. That weekend, I saw my grandchildren, or at least I thought I did. I went to the park where Damien often took them. When I waved at little Oliver, Clarissa's eldest, he waved back instinctively, but Clarissa snatched his hand. "Don't bother her," she hissed. "She's not family anymore. Not family anymore." The words sliced deeper than anything she had said before, my own daughter teaching her children that their grandmother was nothing. But as I stood there, clutching Jonathan's ledger inside my bag, I made myself a promise. Clarissa thinks she's erased me, but she doesn't know this story isn't over. I still hold the one chapter she can't rewrite. And soon the whole world would know it too. They say grief brings families closer. But in my case, grief turned my family into wolves. 3 weeks after Jonathan's funeral, Clarissa began her performance as the perfect daughter in public, crying softly at memorial events, posting flowery tributes online. But behind closed doors, she sharpened her claws. One evening, I walked past my house, the house Clarissa now called hers. Through the tall glass windows, I saw strangers filling my dining room. The air was thick with laughter and the clink of champagne glasses. At the head of the table sat Clarissa, draped in a silk dress, raising a toast. "To fresh beginnings," she announced. "Out with the old, in with the new." Everyone laughed, except me standing outside in the cold, invisible in the shadows. A colleague of hers asked, "But what about your mother? Won't she miss this place?" Clarissa smirked, swirling her wine. She was never suited for a house like this. She collected dusty books, refused to renovate, clung to memories like cobwebs. Honestly, it's better for her to be somewhere smaller, more appropriate. Damien leaned in, adding casually, "Helen's heart was always in libraries, not ledgers. Clarissa has the mind for real responsibility." Laughter erupted again, and I realized to them I wasn't family. I was a joke. The next morning, a message buzzed on my phone. It was from Clarissa, a photo of my garden. The roses Jonathan had planted for our 25th anniversary were gone, bulldozed. In their place, construction crews digging the foundation for a glass wine cellar. Her caption was short, cruel. "Time to modernize, mother." But the sharpest knife came at the park that weekend. I spotted my grandson, Oliver, on the swings. When he saw me, his face lit up and he waved with both hands. Before I could reach him, Clarissa rushed over, pulling him back. "Don't bother her," she snapped. "She's not family anymore." Not family. The boy looked at me with confusion in his eyes, while my daughter, my flesh and blood, dragged him away. I stood there, clutching Jonathan's ledger in my handbag, my knuckles white. For years, I had been quiet. For years, I had let them dismiss me as just the wife, just the mother. But standing in that park, watching my daughter erase me in front of her children, something inside me hardened. "You think you've won, Clarissa, but you've underestimated the quiet ones. You've forgotten that pawns don't always stay pawns." And that day, I swore. Her contempt would be the very rope that tightened around her own neck. The next morning, I took the first bus downtown. The ledger weighed heavy in my handbag, like a heart still beating. The wind cut through my coat as if trying to push me back, but I kept walking, straight to the brass doors of Monroe and Associates. Elias Monroe had been Jonathan's closest friend. They'd gone to university together, survived 2 recessions together, even buried secrets together. If anyone knew the truth, it would be him. When the secretary told him I was here, Elias came out himself. His hair was white now, his glasses perched low, but his eyes still carried that familiar warmth. "Helen," he said softly, "I was wondering when you'd come. I called your house after Jonathan's passing, but Clarissa told me you were traveling." Traveling? The word stung. My daughter had locked me in a motel, then told the world I was on vacation. I steadied my voice. "Elias, I need to know the truth about Jonathan's will." We sat in his oak-paneled office. He opened a thick folder, the kind that smelled faintly of ink and dust. "Helen, your husband updated his will 6 months before his death. He was very specific." He slid the paper toward me. My breath caught. Jonathan's handwriting, his signature, neat as always. Elias began to read aloud. "I, Jonathan Ward, leave to my beloved wife, Helen Ward, 80% of all assets, properties, and accounts, including our primary residence at 54 Maple Lane." My chest tightened. 80%, the house, everything. Then Elias continued. To my daughter, Clarissa Ward, I leave $10 million to be held in trust, contingent upon her respectful care and treatment of her mother following my death. I froze. Contingent. The word burned like fire. Clarissa had told me I inherited nothing, that Jonathan had left her everything. But the truth, Jonathan had written a safeguard. He had known. He had seen her entitlement long before I dared admit it. Elias leaned forward, his voice grave. Helen, if Clarissa mistreated you, she forfeited her inheritance. And if she forged documents to claim otherwise, that's fraud. Serious fraud. My hands shook as I pulled the ledger from my bag and laid it on the table. Elias flipped through it, his brow furrowing deeper with every page. Good God, he muttered. Jonathan left you a trail. He suspected this exact scenario. I whispered, my throat dry. She told me to find somewhere else to die. She forged papers, Elias. She threw me out. His jaw clenched. Then, Helen, your daughter has destroyed herself. Because the moment she humiliated you, the moment she cast you aside, she triggered the very clause that erased her fortune. The $10 million, the trust, the conditions, all of it reverts to you. I stared at him, my world spinning. Elias, are you saying? He met my eyes, steady, certain. I'm saying you are not the poor widow in a motel. You are the legal heir to $33 million and your husband's estate. Clarissa owns nothing. Nothing. The silence in that room was heavier than any courtroom gavel. I thought of Clarissa, sipping wine in my dining room, sneering at me, erasing me in front of my grandchildren, and I almost laughed. Jonathan had played his last move. And now it was my turn to put Clarissa in checkmate. Operation Justice. That's what Elias called it, half smiling as he picked up the phone to contact the courts, the banks, and the district attorney's office. Within hours, every account with Jonathan's name was frozen. Every document Clarissa had submitted was under investigation. The same digital signatures she thought would protect her were now evidence, proof of fraud. At 2:00 p.m., Elias received confirmation. Utilities suspended, accounts frozen, trust revoked. He looked up at me with steady eyes. Helen, your daughter is about to discover her world isn't built on marble, it's built on sand. And at 3:41 p.m., my phone rang. Clarissa. I let it buzz 3 times before I answered. Her voice was sharp, frantic. Mother, where are you? Something's wrong. The bank froze all the accounts, my cards declined. Damien says there must be some mistake. I glanced at Elias, who mouthed, go on. I leaned back in the leather chair. No mistake, Clarissa, I'm sitting in Elias Monroe's office. Your father's lawyer, you remember him, don't you? The one you told everyone I was too distraught to meet. Silence, heavy, then a shaky laugh. Mother, you're confused. You're letting people take advantage of you. I was only protecting you from the stress of handling so much money. Her audacity nearly made me laugh out loud. Even caught, she was trying to twist the knife. I cut her off, my voice steady. Protecting me? Clarissa, you forged legal documents, you committed fraud, and worst of all, you told me I was useless. Do you remember those words? Her tone cracked, slipping into desperation. Mother, please, you don't understand how complicated this is. Let's meet, talk about it. I tightened my grip on the phone. Oh, we'll meet, darling, at the courthouse when you're arraigned. Elias raised his eyebrows, impressed. That evening, the district attorney's office filed a motion. Fraudulent documents, elder abuse, forgery. The headlines the next morning lit up every news feed in Denver. Prominent lawyer under investigation for inheriting mother's estate fraudulently. Clarissa showed up at my motel, eyes red, mascara smeared. Damien stood behind her, silent for once, like a dog whose bark had lost its bite. Mother, please, she whispered. Think about the children. Think about your grandchildren. Don't drag this through the courts. I looked her straight in the eye, the way Jonathan once did when she lied as a child. You should have thought about them before you erased me from their lives. before you told me to find somewhere else to die." In that moment, I saw it, the first crack in Clarissa's perfect armor. She wasn't the glamorous lawyer, the woman who owned everything. She was just a frightened girl who realized her greed had cost her everything. And for the first time in decades, it was me holding the cards. The night after Clarissa came begging at the motel, I didn't sleep. I sat by the dim lamp, the ledger open in front of me, Jonathan's handwriting staring back like a ghost. For 43 years, I had been a wife, a mother, a caretaker. Always soft, always quiet, always bending so others wouldn't break. But as the clock ticked toward midnight, I realized something. If I bent one more time, I would snap. The next morning, Elias slid a folder across his desk. "Charges are ready. Elder abuse, fraud, forgery. Once you sign, there's no turning back." I stared at the pen heavy in my hand. "Elias, she's still my daughter." He met my eyes, steady but kind. "She's also a lawyer who threw her mother onto the street for money. If she weren't your blood, you wouldn't hesitate. Ask yourself, Helen, does she deserve mercy or justice?" That evening, my phone buzzed again. Clarissa. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Her voice was broken, raw. "Mother, please, I made mistakes, but I'm still your daughter. Don't do this. Think of Oliver and Emma. They'll grow up hating you if you send their parents to prison." I let her words sink in. Once they might have worked. Once I might have folded at the mention of my grandchildren. But not now. I lifted the phone slowly and said, "No, Clarissa, they'll grow up knowing exactly why their mother lost everything, because she thought greed was more important than family. That's not on me, that's on you." The line went quiet, then a whisper, "You wouldn't dare," and something inside me, something sharp and final, clicked into place. "Watch me." The next morning in the courthouse, my signature dried in black ink on the affidavit. The charges were official. Clarissa and Damien would face trial. As I walked out into the cold Denver air, I felt it. Not grief, not guilt, but clarity. For the first time in decades, I wasn't just Jonathan's wife or Clarissa's mother. I was Helen Ward, and I had made the coldest, hardest, most necessary decision of my life. The courthouse smelled of marble and fear. Reporters crowded the steps, cameras flashing like lightning storms. Inside, Clarissa sat at the defendant's table, her once perfect hair tied back in a messy knot, her suit wrinkled, her eyes hollow. Damien sat beside her, jaw clenched, his expensive watch already confiscated as evidence. I should have felt triumphant. But as the judge read the charges, forgery, elder abuse, fraud, I felt something colder, inevitability. When the prosecution played the recordings, the room went silent. Clarissa's own voice echoed through the speakers. "Find somewhere else to fade away. You're useless now." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Her colleagues, her so-called friends, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. For once, Clarissa had nothing to say. No sharp rebuttal, no silver-tongued argument, just silence. The verdict was swift. 18 months in federal prison for fraud and elder abuse. Damien received 2 years for conspiracy. As the gavel struck, Clarissa turned toward me. Her eyes weren't angry. They weren't defiant. They were just tired. "Mother," she whispered, so quietly only I could hear, "I never hated you. I just wanted to prove I could be stronger than you ever were." I didn't answer, because in that moment she finally understood. Strength isn't cruelty. Strength is survival. Weeks later, a letter arrived in my mailbox. The handwriting was shaky, but it was hers. "Mother, prison has stripped everything from me. Status, money, pride. But what hurts most is losing you. I don't ask for forgiveness. I only ask that one day Oliver and Emma know the truth, that their mother was wrong and their grandmother was right." I folded the letter and placed it inside the ledger between Jonathan's pages. Not to forget it, not to forgive it, but to remember. And here's the twist Jonathan left me, the part that still haunts me. At the very back of the ledger, behind a sealed envelope, I found his handwriting. "Helen, if you are reading this, it means my fears about Clarissa were true. But remember, she is still our daughter. Protect her children, they will need you more than ever. Tears blurred the ink. Jonathan, even in death, had seen further than both of us, so I made my choice. I cut Clarissa from my life, but I did not cut her children. Every Sunday, Oliver and Emma visit me in the house their grandfather built. We bake bread, we read books, we plant roses where their mother's wine cellar was meant to be. And when they ask about their mother, I don't lie. I tell them. She made mistakes, terrible ones, but mistakes don't erase love. They only show us how fragile it is when we take it for granted. As the sun sets over Denver, I stand at the porch, the ledger closed at last. For decades, I lived as a wife, a mother, a pawn in someone else's game. But now, I am the queen. And queens don't just win. They endure. 6 months later, my life no longer looked anything like the motel room where it had all begun. The Ward house, my house, was alive again. The roses Jonathan once planted had grown back, red and defiant, blooming against the Denver wind. Inside, the dining room was no longer a stage for Clarissa's arrogance. It was a place of warmth again, Sunday dinners with Oliver and Emma, laughter echoing against the walls that once carried silence. But the biggest change wasn't in the house. It was in me. With Elias's help, I founded the Ward Foundation for Elder Justice. We offered legal aid to seniors whose own children tried to cheat them, financial literacy programs for retirees, and a hotline for victims of family exploitation. For the first time in my life, my name wasn't just Helen, Jonathan's wife, or Clarissa's mother. It was Helen Ward, founder, survivor, advocate. Reporters called, eager for interviews. Some wanted a scandal, others wanted a headline. I refused most of them. But one question from a young journalist stayed with me. "Mrs. Ward, do you regret bringing your own daughter to court?" I thought about it long and hard before answering. No, because justice isn't about revenge, it's about truth. And the truth is, sometimes love isn't enough to stop someone from destroying you. The law is there to remind them where love fails. The room went silent, and for once people didn't see me as fragile or broken. They saw me as whole. Clarissa wrote to me from prison, letters full of apologies, excuses, and memories she suddenly wanted to preserve. I kept them unopened, stacked neatly in a drawer. Maybe one day I'll read them, but not today, because forgiveness is not owed. It is earned. The last page of Jonathan's ledger remains blank. Sometimes I run my fingers over it and wonder, should I write something there? One evening, as the sun dipped low, I finally picked up my pen and wrote a single line. The best revenge is not to destroy your enemies, but to become everything they never believed you could be. And with that, I closed the ledger for the last time, not as Jonathan's widow, not as Clarissa's victim, but as Helen Ward, a woman who turned silence into power, betrayal into justice, and endings into beginnings.